In this podcast, two Gen Xers are taking a trip down memory lane, revisiting and reflecting on the cinema of the 1980s. We'll look at the hits and the flops, the studio blockbusters and art house indies, the critically acclaimed, and the universally reviled. The series is hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli, a writer and librarian, and features Dustin Morrow, a filmmaker, author, and professor of film. So pull on your legwarmers, crank up your boombox, and hop in the DeLorean. It's time for the long rewind. Welcome to the long rewind. I'm your host, Lisa. With me, as always, is Dustin.
Hello.
And we're here today to talk to you about 80s movie remakes. So what can we say?
Remakes of movies and TV shows that were originally produced in the 1980s.
And were then remade later on.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into it. What would you like to say about 80s movie
I'm wondering,
remakes?
just first of all, what are your thoughts on remaking old stuff that maybe some people consider to be sacred, or like let's say, I mean, I was going to say let's say they remake Dirty Dancing, but they already did.
Yep.
So Dirty Dancing is one of your favorite movies, if not your favorite movie. So how did you feel when you found out they were remaking Dirty Dancing? Did it annoy you? Did you care? Because some people get really up in arms about this, as though somehow remaking something denigrates or soils or colors the original in some way. I'm wondering how you feel about it.
I mean, I'm not that kind of fangirl. Pop culture never feels to me like something to get that up in arms about. That's me personally. That's not everybody. No shade. But I mean, I think I was annoyed. I was like, why? I think for me, it's more like, why? Why are you, this movie is so great. Why are you bothering? And then I remember,
the
money.
Answer is
it's
always
money.
The same,
right.
Yeah.
Like it's always money. And so I guess
I
hate
to tell you this, but that's why the original Dirty Dancing was made too.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the single reason that Hollywood makes films at all.
Of course.
It's always about money.
Right. And I get that, of course. It's not that I don't know that. It's like a journey in my head of like annoyance of like, there's this great movie. Why would you bother remaking it? And then I'm like, oh, right. It's money. But that feels like more of a money grab to me than the original make of the movie. Obviously, every movie is made, or most movies are made to make money. Of course, there's indies and art films and whatever. But of course, you want to make money on a movie. But like when you're doing it just to appeal to someone's, nostalgia and therefore their wallet,
steal some money out of their wallet.
Yeah, like it just feels like, and most of the time you're like, how is it going to be better? How is it going to be? I mean, sometimes I have seen remakes that were legitimately good, and we'll talk about that obviously. But I think most of the time I'm like, why would I watch this? I'm not going to watch this, especially if it's a movie that I loved, like Dirty Dancing, and Point Break is another. That one I got kind of real mad about, and I'm not sure why. But I'm like, why? I guess I feel like they're not getting my money, because why would I watch it?
Yeah.
I don't know. How about you? I think you don't. I don't know. Maybe you have a similar. What are your feelings about remakes?
Generally, I don't care.
Mm-hmm. I think that's generally true for me too. It's only when I really love it.
It's not like because somebody made a movie, which, by the way, you don't have to see.
Yep.
It does anything to, like, there's no reason that you can't go back and just watch the original and ignore the remake.
Yeah.
It doesn't really stain the original because it's still there and it's still great. Yep. And presumably it still means a lot to you. Mm-hmm. Having said that, I do remember, so my favorite movie of the 80s, as you know, is Romancing the Stone.
Yep.
And when they announced a remake of that some years ago with Katherine Hagel and Gerard Butler, I remember being like, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Please don't do that.
You feel this way too sometimes.
But I think it was more, it wasn't so much like don't touch it. It was, my thought was, if you're going to touch it, try to do it well. Mm-hmm. And the idea that like Katherine Hagel would be playing Joan Wilder for me was meant like from the outset that it was just automatically going to be bad. And so I just thought, well, that's a bummer, because if they're going to like remake it, I wish they'd at least try to, I mean, I know it's not going to be as good as the original, but I might enjoy some aspect of it if they at least remake it well.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I think I generally also don't really care. And I will, a lot of times, you know, I usually take a page out of your book. If you tell me a remake is good, I'll watch it. Like, I'm not 100% against remakes, but when you're talking specifically about something like Dirty Dancing, I'm just like, ugh, why would you bother?
I definitely don't think it's the common conception of most people that remakes automatically suck because otherwise they wouldn't keep making them.
Yeah, I guess that's
the only
true.
reason they continue to make them is because the intellectual property has value.
Yeah.
And so if it stopped having value, then they wouldn't make these things anymore.
Yep.
The only way you can buy the argument that everybody hates all these remakes and the fact that they're being made is if you believe the idea that the only reason anybody is watching them is like out of morbid curiosity.
And
I'm sure a lot of people do.
Sure,
I'm sure a lot of these like a lot of the like fanboys that go online and are like, they should never touch this movie. They should never do it. I'm sure that those guys then also see the movie,
of course,
that they claim is going to be garbage.
Well, and not only that, I do wonder if, I mean, they usually, isn't that old saying like no press is bad press? So even, you know, getting all this attention for you know, even if it's negative attention for something probably doesn't hurt in the long run, really. So it's only if you don't see it at all or you're ignoring it that it's a bad thing.
The biggest bummer, I think, about remakes in general is not the remakes themselves, but just the idea that it represents a shortcut that Hollywood is taking to. Yeah. It's representative of how expensive it's become to market a movie, and the idea that, you know, you spend more money now marketing a movie than you do to make the actual movie. And so I get that any kind of little head start that they can get, like if you could start on the 100-yard line instead of zero,
a recognizable
because
brand.
you've used recognizable IP, then why wouldn't you do it? It's free. It's kind of free built-in advertising in a way, but it means that we get fewer original stories. And you know, all these movies that we're talking about, almost all of them, maybe there may be a few exceptions, but most of the movies we're going to mention today, when they were made in the 80s, were original stories.
And I think
so it's a bummer that instead of doing original stories, they're just like, because we need more original stories.
Well, and I think maybe I didn't quite get that across. My thought process, I think, does, and the bummer in my head is exactly that. It's like, why are you spending your time? I mean, and yes, I know you're spending your time on this because you're hoping it'll make money because everybody knows what this is. But that is the bummer, is like they could have made something new, because as you're saying, this stuff in the 80s was new and we loved it and it was great. And maybe we could have that again. Maybe we could have another original thing that would be great. Yeah. But that's not what they're spending their time and their money on. So, yeah.
So another thing that comes up on this podcast often, because it's a podcast about 80s movies hosted by a couple of Gen X-ers, is the idea of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, a huge part of this too, built into this, that it's not just that we recognize the IP. It's got to be IP you recognize that you have some affection for.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, like, if I go even to a remake that I suspect is probably going to be bad, I'll usually give it a watch anyway, just because it's yet another way for me to connect with the original thing that I love. And if it's bad, then it doesn't usually make me mad. It's sort of like well, of course that was going to be bad.
Yeah. Yeah, not surprised.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, some people would be like, why would you watch something that you suspect is going to be bad? But I feel like in some ways it makes me appreciate the original thing even more.
Yeah.
Seeing how it could have gone wrong. I mean, there's a common narrative about film production that, you know, there are so many people working on a film, hundreds of people on a big budget film, if not thousands, for the work that those people are doing to like come together and make something good is kind of a miracle. It's always kind of, most movies do stink. I mean, they just do. It's rare that you get a good movie.
Yeah, the statistics,
Yeah. And so for it to come together and work is incredible. And so if you see a bad version of something that already exists, it's like, oh, that thing that already exists really was really good.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. That's really interesting. And I don't know that I've ever really hate watched a remake. If I didn't want to watch it, I usually just didn't. Like with Dirty Dancing, like why would I watch a Dirty Dancing without Patrick Swayze?
We watched it though, didn't we?
I don't think we watched.
I've seen it. Did I watch it alone? I thought you watched it with me.
I don't remember.
It's Abigail Breslin plays
Oh, it was
Baby.
a TV thing.
Yeah, it was made for TV.
Okay. I think I watched I don't think I ended up watching the whole thing. We may not have watched the whole
thing. Yeah, it was bad. It was tedious. It was kind of boring. That's my memory of it.
I think I have that same...
I like Abigail Breslin. She's a good little actress. I like her too,
of course. Yeah. Yeah, it's...
But anyway. She was a weird choice for that part.
Well, and again, Patrick Swayze is like
I can't
half
even remember
the magic
who the
of that
Patrick
movie.
Swayze guy.
I don't.
Oh, you know what else I remember about it? There was kind of like a there was kind of like a dance techno cover of "She's Like the Wind."
Oh, was there
in it?
Oh,
or maybe it was "Hungry Eyes." One of the big B singles off of Dirty Dancing had this kind of like strange Euro.
They tried to like modernize
disco.
It.
Yeah, that was really weird. I think maybe it was Hungry Eyes.
I blocked this out.
Yeah, that kind of Hungry Eyes.
Okay. Well, anyway, that's a really interesting point about like seeing it and then being like, oh wow, I really appreciate the original a lot more. That's interesting.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
I mean, I'm sure some people would just be like, well, you could do that by watching the original again and just appreciating it and not suffering through some bad remake. But there is like, I mean, I mentioned the thing about morbid curiosity.
Sure.
And I don't believe that the average casual moviegoer watches movies that way. But for a hardcore cineast like me, like I do watch things out of morbid curiosity. Like I'll if it's some movie I really love and they've remade it and I think they blew it, I want to see how they blew it.
You're a filmmaker.
Curious. Yeah.
You like to break this down. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also what I appreciate you doing that is sometimes you will come across one that's actually legitimately good, like a remake that's
we'll
really
talk
great.
about that when we go through some of these. There are some that were like real surprises.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And you can't know until you try it.
Exactly, which is something you have taught me with a lot of movies.
Yeah. So before we start, though, I pulled some numbers out of, I think it was Rotten Tomatoes. I forgot to write the source, which is terrible of me, especially since I'm sitting with a librarian here.
I'll let it go this time.
I'm pretty sure it was Rotten Tomatoes that I got this off of.
Probably.
But it's just an interesting sort of comparison of the numbers between the original films of the 80s that have been remade and those resulting remakes. So, for example, the average budget of the movies that have been remade in the 80s was $13 million, and the average budget of those remakes was $64 million.
Yeah.
The average box office of those films in the 80s was $81 million, and the average box office of the remakes is $156 million. Of course, you have to account for inflation there. So it sounds like they made more, but they actually made less. The average original profit of those movies in the 80s was $68 million. The average profit of the remakes is $92 million. And the average Rotten Tomatoes score of those films in the 80s was 79%. And the average Rotten Tomatoes score of the remakes is 45%. So about half as good.
Yeah.
Which is fair.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
I think it's generous to say that most of these remakes are half as good as the originals. Like they're probably not half as good.
I mean, what I'm also noticing though, another reason I'm seeing that a remake is seen to be a good idea by a studio is that average budget of like $64 million, that's not that high a budget, right? Like
no, not by today's standards.
Pretty inexpensive. So it's the investment is not as much.
Yeah, because you can lean on the IP because you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to spend to make people aware of like what it is.
Well, like let people what is like a big or normal budget today, and just to compare it to that $64 million.
Oh, I don't know. Like it depends on the genre of movie. These superhero movies are now costing north of 200.
I guess I just wanted people to understand that like some of the big movies you're seeing now are so much more than $64 million. I mean, even as
like,
much as that sounds like,
they're making fewer of these, but even like a big budget comedy that gets released into theaters is going to probably be like 45 to 60 at least.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I just wanted to give people like a sense of scale here.
Yeah.
64 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is. But you know, you can spend 200 million or more on a big budget superhero movie. So.
As you'll see from when we go through the list, a massive percentage of these remakes are horror films.
Mm-hmm.
And the budgets of horror films tend to be really small compared to other movies because it's a genre that doesn't need stars.
And that's always
been the case.
It's not a
top-heavy genre.
That's been the case throughout film history,
forever,
right?
Yeah,
that's always the case.
People will go to those movies without stars in them.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yep.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's other ways we can break this down, but I just thought like we would talk about some of the good ones, some of the bad ones, some of the ones that kind of fall in between.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'll mention first, just because I just mentioned it, like this incredible string of horror movies. It seems like every horror franchise from the 80s has been remade.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I guess because it's so cheap to make a horror film.
Mm-hmm.
Even the budgets of these remakes are going to be really low.
Yeah.
Probably fairly comparable even to the originals, which were not particularly high budget movies in the 80s.
Yeah, wow.
And horror fans will go to movies and you know, they'll just go to everything. They're known as not a very discerning audience.
Right. Well, but it's like, if you think about some of the horror movies, they had like an anchoring character like Freddy Krueger or Jason or whatever, but I don't think people were necessarily attached to the person who played those characters. So you could bring back that character. I mean, maybe some people were attached to Robert Englund, I don't know, as Freddy, but like they'd be happy to see that character and probably don't really care who's playing it, right? So like you said, they don't care if there's a star in the movie.
Yeah. So here are some of the 80s movies that have been remade. And I would argue that not one of these remakes is good.
Okay. I mean, obviously other people may have other opinions. This is the opinion of this show, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure.
Or maybe, I don't know, maybe this is general
again,
opinion.
like, not to knock the horror fans out there. I mean, I enjoy a good, well-made horror movie. They're very few and far between, but they're not the most critical audience. They're very forgiving.
Mm-hmm. And God bless them. That's nice to
it's
be,
great.
Right?
If you can find pleasure in these things, and you're ahead of me.
Have a lot more fun that way, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But most of these movies are bad because they're very watered down versions of the originals, and I think
that's interesting.
I think if you looked at, I don't have the ratings in front of me, but I think the vast majority of these movies were PG-13 remakes of R-rated films.
It's pretty rare, actually, to make an R-rated film these days, right? They try to go for PG-13,
the studios
right?
don't want to spend money on making a movie that young people, which is the biggest audience of film goers, especially for horror films, can't get into.
That's so. I hadn't even realized, because I don't pay attention to ratings anymore the way I used to. I didn't realize that was a thing.
Yeah,
but it is.
So here's the list, and believe it or not, I've seen all of these.
I believe it.
Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Firestarter, Prom Night, My Bloody Valentine, April Fool's Day, and When a Stranger Calls. Those are both by our friend of the show, Fred Walton.
Fred Walton, the wonderful guy. Fred Walton. Mm-hmm.
Sorority Row, which is a remake of The House on Sorority Row, The Hitcher, The Evil Dead, The Stepfather, Hellraiser, Child's Play, The Watcher in the Woods, and Maniac.
So those are just the horror movies, right?
These are just 80s horror movies that have been remade.
And that you think are not good. That are
bad remakes. I mean, yeah.
Or I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth.
No, I'm just looking at the list and I'm thinking, was there anything in here that I particularly liked? And there really wasn't. When a Stranger Calls is not horrible. It has kind of an interesting high-tech twist on the original story.
You'd have to, I don't know when that remake
But the rest of these are really
but,
bad. Like Firestarter, I would argue, is literally unwatchable.
That's one of a few of these that I've seen, and it was
awful.
Pretty dreadful.
Yeah. Evil Dead, I'm sure there are horror fans that love that movie. all they did, I think,
you mean the remake we're talking about here?
Yeah, all I think they did was try to make the goriest film that they could possibly make, but there's an audience for that.
Sure.
Child's Play tried to put like AI into Chucky, which made no sense to me.
Right.
Maniac has kind of an interesting. Why am I blanking on his name? The Hobbit, the main Hobbit.
Oh,
Elijah Wood.
Yeah, Elijah Wood.
Kind of an interesting Elijah Wood central performance, but is a pretty gruesome and unpleasant movie.
I can see why I haven't seen a lot of these from what you're saying.
I like the guy that played Freddy Krueger in the Nightmare on Elm Street remake. He's a great actor, interesting actor. He's been around forever. I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, okay.
He played Kelly in all the Bad News Bears movies.
Oh.
Kelly Leak.
Oh, yeah. And
he was not Oscar nominated, I think,
He's
for
great.
Little Children.
What the heck is his name? I know who he is.
I know. It's on the... I'm looking it up because he's
a really good actor.
Jackie Earle Haley.
Right. Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, he played Freddy in the remake. Okay. It just sadly was not very good.
That's too bad.
Anyway, so that's the horror. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's talk about... Should we talk about the good ones or the bad ones or the so-so ones first?
Well, since you started with bad horror,
maybe we should stay with the bad ones and then end with the good ones.
Yeah, let's end on a high
note.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, I mean, feel free to disagree with me. This is my list, but
I don't think I've seen a lot of these. So yeah, let's see what we got.
Endless Love, which was a really milquetoast remake of a batshit crazy film from the 80s. The film from the 80s is not a good film,
right?
But it's a ballsy, crazy film.
It goes
because it is nuts,
yeah.
and they just made the most vanilla Lifetime TV movie-ish version of it they could make.
As you're saying with the gory horror stuff, there's definitely a market for that, right? For like a sort of Hallmarky Lifetime movie.
Yeah. The Karate Kid, which I think was a hit, but man, did I hate it. I love Jackie Chan, but it's the one with Will Smith's son.
Jackie Chan was in that?
Yeah, he plays Miyagi.
Oh my God. Okay.
But what's his name? Will Smith's son. Jaden Smith plays the Karate Kid. And it was produced by his dad. And it smacks of kind of a vanity project. And
I remember it being out. This is one I definitely ignored just because of my love for the original.
The Karate Kid. Yeah, it's horrible. And it led to one of the more depressing moments I've ever had in a classroom. Where I was teaching a class and I made some reference to the Karate Kid. And the students were like, "You mean that Jaden Smith movie?"
And this was at least a decade ago, right? This was a while ago.
This was a long time ago. Yeah. More than that. It was like 15 years ago this happened.
That's so
and
sad.
I was like, no, I'm not talking about the Jaden Smith movie.
I mean, the good news is today with Cobra Kai, that might not happen.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure kids today are aware of what the Karate Kid is.
Yeah.
But there was a point where they thought it was a Jaden Smith movie.
Oh, boy. Chilling.
Yeah.
Chilling.
Arthur, which of course is a wonderful comedy.
What you and I both
from the
love.
80s, but they remade it with...
Russell Brand,
yeah. And the Lisa Molinelli character is played by Greta Gerwig.
Oh my gosh, really?
Oof, yeah.
Wow.
It's horrible.
She's
also, it
tough shoes to fill.
It takes the alcoholism out, which is sort of beside the it's sort of like, well, what is this movie about even then?
Yeah, I didn't see that either, but that sounds ill-advised.
It's terrible. Yeah. It's sort of like they were like, Dudley Moore was one of the most charming actor comedians of his decade. Who can we replace him with? I know, one of the most obnoxious.
I mean, obviously Russell Brand must have his fans, but those, I mean, boy, Liza and Dudley, those are tough shoes to fill. And why would you bother filling them? I'm not totally sure, but
Overboard. This is another movie that I couldn't even get through. Anna Faris, she's actually a perfect replacement for Goldie, I think. Yeah. Of all the actresses that are working today, she comes closest to doing the kind of stuff Goldie did. But the movie is awful.
Didn't they flip the roles in that too? It was sort of they
had to.
Yeah. Oh, right.
Think about it.
Yeah. I only sort of know Overboard.
With the plot of Overboard would be
I guess that wouldn't really work. I don't know Overboard all that well, but I know it well enough to know that would be
It's
bad.
not a great movie, but man, it looks like Shakespeare next to the remake. The Hustle, which is a pretty depressing remake of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Okay.
It's Anne Hathaway and Rebel Wilson play the Michael Caine and Steve Martin parts.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, tough shoes to fill, but
yeah, it's bad.
There it is. Yeah.
Adventures in Babysitting.
They remade that?
Yes, they remade it as a Disney movie, like a TV movie.
Okay.
I think I saw it, but I literally remember nothing about it, which means that it probably wasn't great.
Yeah.
Annie.
There's been a few remakes of that. Have there?
There's only been one theatrical remake of it, though, and that was the Jamie Foxx version where Jamie Foxx plays Daddy Warbucks, and the little girl from Beasts of the Southern Wild plays Annie.
Yep.
And
I didn't see it, I have to admit.
It was terrible.
Okay.
Yeah, really bad. Dirty Dancing, the aforementioned,
which we've talked about,
was I think made for television.
That's
you would think Dirty Dancing could get a theatrical remake, wouldn't you?
Yeah, although
if you were going to remake Dirty Dancing, like, come on, show it some respect and put some money behind it, get real stars and put it in the theater.
Yeah. I
don't know, it's weird.
It is
weird to me.
Don't ask me.
It's such a beloved film.
I just think it's, again, tough shoes to fill, especially in terms of Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
But
you really didn't see this? Surprised.
I think maybe you had me see it. Maybe we watched a little bit of it, or I watched.
You love that movie so much. I'm surprised you wouldn't want to see what they did to it. Maybe, but maybe not. That's why. Red Dragon, which was not really a remake. It's like
a prequel.
Well, no, it's essentially kind of a remake of Manhunter, Michael Mann's masterpiece from the 80s.
Yeah,
the first appearance of Hannibal Lecter, but Manhunter was an adaptation of Red Dragon, the book. And so this was another version of it. And
I see.
It was made essentially to capitalize on Anthony Hopkins' fame within that role, because he plays Lecter in it. And Edward Norton plays
That's what I remembered,
Which sounds great on paper, except that it was directed by one of the biggest hack filmmakers of all time, Brett Ratner, who just ruins everything he touches, and that was no exception.
Okay.
The Vanishing, which is a really strange remake in that it was made by the same director, like a year later.
Are you talking about? Wasn't it originally a Dutch film or something? Yeah. Okay.
It's great and really bleak.
Yeah, that's my
depressing,
understanding.
Dark thriller about a woman that goes missing at a gas station and how her boyfriend can't, for years, it kind of destroys his life. He can't live with the idea of not knowing what happened to her, and it sort of cuts back and forth between his journey and the journey of the sociopath that took her.
Wow.
And you find out what he did with her at the end of the movie in a really twisted, creepy way.
Yeah.
That revelation happens, and it ends on an unbelievably bleak, depressing note.
I don't know if I could watch
the American remake, which isn't terrible, but it doesn't have the courage to do that ending. Like, it literally has this really corny, happy ending that feels like tacked on, because they were like, well, we can't
make it end that way. I see.
But yeah, I mean, it's good actors. Like the boyfriend is Kiefer Sutherland.
I thought it was Kiefer Sutherland.
The missing woman is Sandy Bullock, and
really?
kidnapper is Jeff Bridges.
Oh wow,
giving a very weird performance.
Yeah.
Gloria was a remake of the classic John Cassavetes, Gina Rowlands mob thriller, with Sharon Stone replacing Gina Rowlands and not doing a particularly great job of it. So those are the ones that I would say were kind of bad.
Okay.
And then there's just like a whole, like, there's a bunch of like kind of shrug.
Like mediocre.
Like movies that have like, maybe they don't work great overall, but there's something good about them. And into this category, I would put RoboCop.
That's, who was in that?
Joel Kinnaman plays Peter Weller, plays RoboCop.
Oh, okay.
The thing that I think works about it is the supporting cast is pretty good. The guy that builds RoboCop is Gary Oldman.
Oh.
The villain is Michael Keaton. So it has a pretty solid group of supporting actors.
Yeah.
City of Angels, which is a remake of Wings of Desire with stars Nicolas Cage and Meg Ryan. And it kind of makes a kind of conventional
It's very
romantic
rom-com,
drama. It's not
drama,
a com.
you know,
but
it's not a com. You're right. Meg made me say it, I guess. It's a drama. Mm-hmm. Schlocky kind of.
Yeah.
Especially in comparison to Wings of Desire, which is not
Meg
schlocky
Ryan
at all.
is pretty not great in it.
Yeah.
Nicolas Cage is okay. He's surprisingly not bad in the part. Yeah. And it has a beautiful score.
It does have a beautiful score. I have seen this. So
not terrible.
No. Wings of Desire is obviously a billion times better.
Yeah. So they remade Fame.
I didn't know that.
Which is okay. It has none of the edge. Like the original had a lot of grit and was kind of actually pretty downbeat. Yeah. Thanks to Alan Parker, the British realist filmmaker who made it. And the remake is very like Step Up or Drumline or those kinds of. Oh,
I see. Yeah.
Honey. Do you remember those movies that were like really big movies for a while about like dance?
Almost like inspirational dance movies, kind of. I don't know how to explain it.
And they just turned it into that and they stripped it of any kind of edge that the original had.
Okay.
Vacation, which was actually more of a sequel than a remake because it follows Rusty Griswold.
Right, in a similar situation to his dad. Yep.
And it's not bad. It's funny.
It has some real funny moments. I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen a few of the funny
Ed Helms plays Rusty and Christine Applegate plays his wife. And Chevy shows up and totally steals the movie in the third act and reminds you of like why he's as good as he is.
Right.
Chris Hemsworth has an unbelievably hilarious 10-minute cameo in the middle of the movie.
Yeah.
So it's dopey and works blue in the way that a lot of modern comedies unfortunately lean into too much, I think.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I mean, it's got some really funny stuff. It's got some really dumb stuff that's not funny, but the stuff that works really well.
Well, and that's something we didn't really talk about with any of these. We didn't directly address the fact that a lot of these remakes really do become kind of products of their time. You just mentioned Fame was sort of mimicking a lot of those inspirational dance movies, right? And Vacation works blue in a way that, comedies didn't do as much before. So maybe some of that's part of the remake.
And these next two do that too, like Conan the Barbarian, which was remade with Jason Momoa as Conan.
Okay. Sure.
And Clash of the Titans. Yeah. Are both just like, they're not bad, they're just CGI fests. Like they're the CGI just got out of control on them, and they just play like parades of kind of really bad to pretty good CGI, like this range, like depending on the scene. Some of it is really cool to look at, and some of it's really bad. Yeah. Clash of the Titans has Liam Neeson as Zeus though, which is not nothing.
Yeah.
And Momoa is a charismatic actor and on paper a great choice as Conan.
I would have thought so.
He's no Arnold Schwarzenegger, but
no one
it works. Flowers in the Attic. That was a TV remake with Ellen Burstyn, who kind of elevates it.
Wow,
quite a bit.
Is it as bonkers? I mean, the original is bonkers. Yeah.
It was, I think it might have been made for Lifetime. In fact.
So this is another one of those situations where they watered it down a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty PG.
Because Flowers in the Attic is
Have you seen the original Flowers in the Attic movie with Christy Swanson?
I might have watched
Louise
at least
Fletcher.
Some of it. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen the whole thing.
Yeah.
I
never read the book.
Under the eyes,
it's one of those, every girl in my class when I was a kid had that book. And I remember the cover that had like the hole cut out in the front. Like, so you were looking through a window or something.
Yeah.
And
I read it too. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, but my only knowledge of the narrative and stuff was the movie, which really, I think, implies the incest angle, but doesn't explicitly.
You mean the original?
Lean into it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, probably neither of them were explicit about it. Yeah, it's there for sure in the book. Yeah. Pretty wild.
Pet Sematary was remade. John Lithgow is a huge, add to that film. And it's actually, I think, a better movie than the original, which doesn't mean that it's great, but it's a hard book to adapt because the book is so grim and so mean-spirited. And this movie and the original movie are both really mean-spirited too. Red Dawn with Chris Hemsworth, right before he became really famous.
Right.
Adrian Palicki from Friday Night Lights and Connor Cruise, son of Tom Cruise.
Really?
Yeah. I think the only thing he ever acted in.
I didn't know he had another
Yeah.
child. Okay.
Oh, yeah. He's adopted. He's one of the kids that he adopted with Nicole Kidman.
I totally forgot that. That's crazy. I forgot.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
You know, Red Dawn, the original.
You love the original.
I do.
So I'll be interested.
It's a very
to hear
weird
your take.
movie. It's a John Milius movie, and it's actually really melancholy and really downbeat. Given and
it has a mood,
and it's a goofy as hell premise that John Milius, the filmmaker, takes very seriously. Yeah. And what the remake does is not do that. It has the premise, but it treats it like Saturday afternoon popcorn entertainment instead of as this serious kind of treatise on war.
Well, and these were very different times. I mean, when the original Red Dawn came out, there were people who were concerned that something like that could actually happen. Whereas I don't know when the remake was made. We weren't quite in the same place then. Things have changed from then even, but well,
what's interesting about the remake in terms of when it was made is that when they shot it, they made China the villain that is attacking the United States. And then the studio was like, wait a minute, we can't release this in the second biggest market in the world. Yeah,
that's become a big concern.
They CGI'd North Korea onto all the uniforms, onto all the flags.
Because no one's going to have a problem with that except for North Korea, I guess. Yeah.
So, really dumb.
Wow.
And it flopped anyway. So,
yeah. Oh, well.
The Fog. Did you see the remake of The Fog?
I don't think so. I love the original.
Yeah. I mean, you can't remake Carpenter because Carpenter has such a distinct
he's an auteur,
visual and sonic style, right?
Yeah.
His music doesn't sound like any other music.
No.
And his films aren't shot like any other films.
Right.
They just have a tone that works. And as is the case with a lot of action and horror movies and fantasy movies, when you replace practical effects with CGI effects, sometimes that means you can do stuff that you couldn't do back in the day. But mostly what it means is that your movie has this sort of non-tactile quality that makes it feel innately less frightening because you can tell that the thing is not there.
The stakes feel lower.
And that's what hurts the remake of The Fog to a large degree. Yeah. But it's not a bad movie. Okay. Selma Blair plays Stevie Wayne, the Adrienne Barbeau part. Okay. And she's fine. And
isn't Tom Welling is in that, isn't he?
Yeah, Maggie Grace and Tom Welling are the leads. Yeah. It's like a brisk 85-minute thing. It's,
as you say, popcorny.
Yeah, it's got ghost pirates. I mean, how bad could it be? Assault on Precinct 13 is another John Carpenter remake.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of
that's a great original movie too.
It has none of the grit and the kind of urban western haunting creepy quality of the original. Mm-hmm. In part because it replaces the kind of unknowable, unseeable gang members that are the villains of the original that surround the precinct with dirty cops.
Oh.
Who are actual characters and who you meet all of them.
Oh, okay.
So the guys inside and the guys outside. And that just makes it kind of immediately less scary because it's not a claustrophobic movie. It doesn't pull you up in the precinct in the way that the original does. It does have good actors in it. Ethan Hawke is the cop. Lawrence Fishburne is the criminal.
Okay.
Brian Dennehy's in it. It's got a lot of good character actors and supporting
people who
parts.
Generally play good cop.
Gabriel Byrne is the villain.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So
those are all good choices.
Yeah, it works for what it is. It only doesn't work when you start thinking about the original.
Wow.
But if you watched it without having ever heard of or seen the original, you would probably think it was a pretty great little action movie.
Right. Yeah, it's fair.
The Dukes of Hazzard, which is made by the guys that did Super Troopers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can't pronounce the guy's name. Jay Chandrasekhar, I think.
I don't know their names.
He went on to direct the Goldbergs for many years.
Oh, did he?
Yeah. So it feels more like one of those Super Troopers movies than it does like Dukes of Hazzard.
I see.
It's a very broad. They've turned it into a very broad comedy.
Mm-hmm.
It's Sean William Scott is Luke. or no, he's Bo, and Luke is Johnny Knoxville.
Yeah, I always get them confused. Okay.
Willie Nelson is Uncle Jesse, though.
Yeah, that's...
Linda Carter is Uncle Jesse's girlfriend.
Aw.
Burt Reynolds is
like
Boss
that.
Hogg.
Yeah.
So it's not...
kind of a fun cast.
Yeah, it's a fun cast.
Yeah.
It's you know, it's not great. It's more comedic than it needs to be. But, you know, that show was really dumb. So on the one hand, I don't blame them for leaning into it. And I think it was maybe following the lead of like some other... There have been like a number of remakes that have kind of made fun of the thing while remaking it at the same time. And some of them have done it pretty well, like the A-Team and 21 Jump Street. I mean, 21 Jump Street, the show was not a comedy, but the film is a flat out comedy.
100%. Yeah.
And I think it was trying to follow that kind of...
What's different about
that
all
kind of
of
roadmap?
those,
it just didn't do it as well.
What's different about all of those too is they're all TV show remakes, right? They were TV shows that then they made into this sort of tongue-in-cheek movie situation.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
And then there was Hairspray.
Yeah.
Which took that weird road.
It was an increasingly well-traveled road.
Well-traveled where it starts as a movie.
Yep.
Becomes a
Broadway
musical and then comes back to film as the Broadway musical.
Yeah.
Mean Girls
Yep.
has done that more of late. So yeah, it seems to be a thing.
Yeah.
I don't remember it. I remember Travolta plays
the mom,
the
Tracy
divine part.
The divine part.
And
isn't Christopher Walken his wife?
Michelle Pfeiffer's in it. Oh, is Christopher Walken the husband?
I think
that's.
I might be misremembering. I think so.
I think Michelle Pfeiffer's the villain.
Yeah, she's the mom of the, popular girl or whatever. Yeah. I don't remember the names of the characters that well, but yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah. We won't really go into it, but there've been like another big thing to do, it seems, is to take 80s movies and remake them as limited run series on streaming. But just because more and more stuff is being done on streaming in general.
Yep.
And in my limited experience of having watched these, and I haven't seen many of them, I watched Fatal Attraction recently with Lizzie Kaplan and
Joshua Jackson.
As the Michael Douglas part. They don't tend to work. I mean, just because it's not a narrative it was a narrative that worked really great at 2 hours, and when you spread it to 8, unless you're doing something else with it, then I mean, they did kind of try to do that with Fatal Attraction. They expanded her character and kind of made her character far more sympathetic than the movie did, which is a good thing. It felt like a lot of filler, like so many streaming series do to me.
I didn't see it, so I can't speak to it, but I certainly believe it. I mean, that's a big difference, right? Stretching out the original property that was
Dead
2
Ringers
hours to 8.
is another recent one with
I don't even know.
They did with Rachel Weisz plays the Jeremy Irons part.
I don't even know the original. I guess I'm not.
It's a David Cronenberg thriller about these two twin I think they're plastic surgeons.
Oh.
And there's I can't remember. I haven't seen it since the 80s. But it was one of them's a murderer, I think. I don't remember. Okay. But Jeremy Irons plays both twins.
I see.
And they gender flipped it.
I like Rachel Weisz.
Yeah, she's great.
I don't know that property.
Yeah. So, did I miss anything that you could think of?
Not that I can
anything
really...
that really disappointed you, or...
I don't think it all seems like you got it. Seems like you covered it pretty well. So let's talk about
the ones that maybe really worked.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I made a little list here. Is any of these speaking to you that you want to talk about first?
Well,
I think you like some of these.
Yeah,
too,
I do. 2 of them jump out to me because we've watched them many times because we like them that much. Fright Night and Poltergeist. 2
80s horror movies.
80 horror movies in a similar vein to some degree. Both elevated by some pretty great casts. Let's talk about those. We could start there maybe.
Yeah. So Fright Night, the Tom Holland cult classic, which originally starred Charlie Schlatter and Roddy McDowall and Chris Sarandon as the vampire that lives next door to this suburban teenager who can't get anybody to believe that there's a vampire living next door to him. And so he enlists the help of a guy that doesn't exist anymore, which is in the 80s, there used to be these hosts of horror movies on local TV channels. Like they would often, kind of like Elvira kind of started this way, right?
That gives you a sense.
Like they would dress up like Dracula or whatever, and they would kind of show up in the commercial breaks of like these classic horror films. And usually make corny jokes about them. And so he enlists Roddy McDowall, who plays one of these guys, to help him hunt and destroy the vampire next door.
Yeah.
Remade with Colin Farrell as the vampire. Toni Collette as the mom. Anton Yelkin, the late Anton Yelkin, is the teenager.
Yeah.
And the host is instead of because by this point when this movie was remade in the aughts, that profession didn't really exist anymore. They replaced it with this kind of Chris Allen type of
Chris Angel.
Chris Angel. Chris Allen. I think he's like a American Idol singer.
Oh, well, like one of those like Vegas, like very showy Vegas magician types with long hair and lots of tattoos. And
played by the great David Tennant.
The wonderful David Tennant, who's great. And I mean, actually, I think everyone in this movie is kind of great.
Yeah, what a cast when you think about it. That's a stacked cast for a low-budget horror remake.
Yeah, it's pretty astonishing. And I actually, the other thing I like about this remake is they bring it into a modern setting in a really good way. I don't know exactly what year this was, but it was around the time when a lot of houses were standing empty. There would be all these
I think it was around 2011-ish.
Yeah, okay. So like it was set in like a kind of a Nevada suburb, I think. Yeah, it was not too far from a planned community. And I thought the setting was really good. They updated that well. I think they updated the the David Tennant character was a kind of smart update. And everybody's great in it. I think Colin Farrell's fantastic.
The pacing is really great.
Great.
There are ways. I mean, on the whole, I don't know that I would say it's better than the original, but there are things about it that are better than the original. Like it's paced better.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable.
It has a better cast. So yeah, it really works.
Yeah,
it's super fun. It's a great if you like horror, if you like comedy mixed with your horror, it's a good bet.
Yeah,
and the same thing about Poltergeist. Yeah. Although that's almost entirely attributable to Sam Rockwell playing the lead part, playing the Craig T. Nelson, the father character.
Yeah,
it's nowhere near as good as the original. Is a stone cold classic. I realize
that's a classic,
but it's also a really well paced, fast 90-minute remake that has actually really good CGI. Doesn't overdo it.
I think both of those movies, actually, the effects are pretty good and
hits all the kind of narrative beats of the original without feeling like you're just watching an inferior version of something you've already seen. Like it's different enough to feel like you're seeing something kind of new, but familiar enough to feel like a fun homage, tribute to the original movie. And I think
maybe I was thinking of this movie more so than Fright Night, where they really did connect it to the time it was being made in pretty well, because I think the father has kind of lost his job. He's looking for work. They have to kind of, they go to live in another planned community where a lot of the houses are standing empty, because we're talking about the time where a lot of people were losing their houses, that time of a lot of foreclosures and things. So it has this feel of that like mid-late 2000s economy to it, which I think is kind of interesting. I like that one too.
So another horror remake, and this isn't really a remake so much as a prequel, but you know, it shares the same title, is The Thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that this movie is any good at all is kind of a miracle, because The Thing is maybe the greatest horror film of all time.
It's amazing. Yeah.
I mean, it's in the conversation if it's not.
Definitely. Another Carpenter remake.
Yeah, Carpenter's incredible bleak end of the world thriller. And what The Thing does, if you're a fan of The Thing and you know that the movie The Thing opens with these Norwegian scientists chasing this dog into this American research station up in the North Pole. that's where this movie ends.
Right.
So it shows you the Norwegian encounter with
right. So like what happened before they were chasing that dog. Yeah.
And so if you're a big fan of the movie, as I am, and you could recite it backwards and forwards, part of what's fun about the prequel is it really does, it's kind of a little bit of a greatest hits, because in the original film, they go to the Norwegian station and they find all of this strange stuff. And that goes pretty unexplained. You can kind of assume certain things about what might have happened, but they never really tell you in the film. And in this prequel, you see the origin of all those things that they find in the sequel. And it's sometimes that can go really bad. Like a really horrible version of that kind of work, I would argue, is the Halloween.
Oh yeah, sometimes you don't need an origin
Rob
story.
Zombie did, or any any movie where the original part of the success of it is that it depends on the mystery of the thing. Like I don't want to know anything about Michael Myers any more than I already know. And so when you try to psychoanalyze him and like explain him, then I don't know. I don't want to see that. Like I don't want, it ruins that. Actually, that's the rare kind of work done in a remake that can kind of ruin the original for you in some ways. You kind of want him to still
be a cipher and a sociopath, and that's all you want
exactly.
out of Michael Myers.
So it can be really, that kind of thing can be really hard. And I think that the prequel to The Thing does it pretty well. The other thing, of course, is that like, I think a lot of horror fans and a lot of movie fans in general just dump all over CGI, and it's an easy thing to do, and it's not an unfair thing to do. It, in general, it is not as good as practical effects. Practical effects just are better.
It often leaves me cold a lot of times.
But I don't want to be one of those people that just says all CGI is terrible, because some CGI is incredible. I mean, the Tron sequel.
Yeah, that's true.
I love the original
that's
Tron.
That's actually not on.
But the Tron sequel does stuff that like just blows your eye sockets out. Like it's just so incredible to look at.
Well, and
this is like a movie where if you knew the premise of the movie, or if you saw the original, you're like, oh wow, imagine what they could do with a shape-shifting monster that can look like anything.
Yeah.
With CGI, and that's what they do in this one, and it's for the most part, it's pretty good CGI in this movie, and it's cool to see them. So the Thing in this movie doesn't look like the Thing in the original, but that's okay in some ways. It's cool to see another take on it. It's like a good cover version of a song. You can still love the original song, and somebody can like do a version with different phrasing, different instrumentation.
Sure, of course.
And that's what I feel like this movie and so many of these remakes, the good remakes are. They just feel like
a good cover version.
Yeah, good cover versions.
That's a good way to put it. I hadn't thought of it that way. I did see this. It's been a long time though, and I think I only saw it once. So I don't remember it super well, and I don't remember the CGI. I mean, it's hard to argue that the original Thing's effects are not just creepy as heck and really gross and scary. But maybe I don't remember the CGI, and maybe it was great. And I guess the thing about The Thing, is that it evolves, right? So you could think of it as like, oh, it's changing. It's, you could make that argument too. Yeah.
And not to be misunderstood, I'm not arguing the CGI is better. The effects in the original
You're just saying
Thing
you're willing to go along
times
with that.
better than anything in the prequel, any of the CGI. But
you're willing to go along with it. Yeah.
But if they're going to remake it, then do something different with it. And one of the things you can do different with it is
work
do it with
the
CGI and see what you could do. So,
and it sounds like it was effective enough to make you think it was good.
Yeah, it wasn't horrible. So
yeah.
What else? Oh, a couple comedies maybe. Ghostbusters, which you and I saw during a power outage, if I remember right.
We did, yeah. We had a power outage this was many years ago. We had a power outage, and we were like, well, let's go to the movies.
At our house, and it was like hot as hell out, and we were like, let's go somewhere where they have power and air conditioning, and so we went to the movies, and we saw Ghostbusters.
And now we must explain, this is the Ghostbusters with Kristen Wiig, Melissa McCarthy,
not the Paul Rudd one, which I think is awful.
I haven't seen that one, so I don't know.
It's terrible. But I'm not, I guess they're just going to keep making them, but whatever. And I think maybe like I think this movie got really good reviews, but
Did it?
people didn't like it.
Well,
so
it got
much.
a lot of fanboy flack, right? As I recall.
Oh yeah, it got a lot of. It was a real
time.
the incel community got in an uproar over the fact that they recast the Ghostbusters as with women,
right?
With women actors, and which is so stupid. You could also say, here's another way to look at it. They recast the Ghostbusters with 4 of the funniest actors,
which is like
living,
what the original was,
which is what
right?
you would want if you were going to remake the Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Rather than casting a bunch of dumb kids, which is what they did in later Ghostbusters movies.
I mean, because was the original is all these great SNL actors, and that's what they did in this one too, pretty much.
Yeah. Plus, it's Paul Feig,
right,
who is great.
Yep.
Rarely makes stuff that isn't hilarious and warm and fun. And if I would criticize anything about this movie or any Paul Feig movie, they're usually too long.
Okay.
But they would be maybe better at like 90 minutes than the like 210 that they seem to run.
Was this that long? I don't remember.
They're all pretty long, but it's fun. I mean,
I remember really liking
Melissa
this.
McCarthy is great. Leslie Jones is hilarious. Kate McKinnon's funny. Kristen Wiig's great. They're all great. Chris Hemsworth, oh my God.
is just...
Chris Hemsworth kind of steals the movie.
He's kind of weirdly omnipresent in these 80s remakes, by the way. He's been in 3 of these so far, at least. So
what was the other one?
Red Dawn, and
Red Dawn,
he's in Vacation also.
Vacation,
so there's 3 of them at least. He's hilarious in this movie. That movie is very, very funny. It has a really funny opening too, as I recall. I forget the name of the actor, but there's a character actor in it.
Yeah,
that's also very funny.
Yeah, if you skipped it because you thought, how can they do Ghostbusters without Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and what have you, I would say give it a shot.
Yeah,
give it a chance, because it's
not a shot for shot remake or anything.
Not even close.
Yeah.
It doesn't do the same jokes that the
no.
original did. It's new jokes, and it plays to the strengths of its own actors rather than trying to recreate what Murray was good at.
Yeah,
like none of the 4 characters are just straight up smart, like wry smart asses like Bill Murray. No. They're doing different stuff.
They're playing to Melissa McCarthy's strengths and Kate McKinnon's strengths and everybody. Yeah.
So a weird one on this list, I think, is Footloose. Which is one of my favorite 80s movies.
Yeah.
Oh my God, do I love Footloose.
Yeah.
I have the poster on my wall. That's how much I love Footloose.
Yeah, you do. That's true.
And this is a weird one because, and the first time I saw it, I was like, what is this? Because aside from the Gus Van Sant remake of Psycho, which was intentionally a shot-for-shot remake, Footloose might be closer to its source material than any other remake I've ever seen. Like it really feels, for many long stretches, like a scene-for-scene remake. And so the question is, why would you watch it? And I'm not sure. I had a negative reaction the first time I watched it. And then I was like, a few months later, I was like, I want to see it again. I don't know why, but I do. And then I just started watching it again and again. And I've seen it like quite a number of times now.
Yeah, you and I have watched it a few times, a handful of times.
And I don't know why. I mean, it's kind of just, maybe it's just that the source material, the original Footloose, is so effing fun that if you do it and you just do that material, there's no way for it to not be fun. Here's the thought I remember. So of course it's fun,
right?
But here's the thing I remember after having seen it a few times, which was, I think maybe one of the reasons I'm watching this thing over and over again is that I've seen the original Footloose so many times, like probably over 100 times, easily, that it's that the original's familiarity, while it feels like a warm blanket, there's nothing new for me to find in Footloose.
Yeah, it's not fresh to you anymore.
Yeah. And so watching the remake, it's like, oh, they're dancing different because the dancing style is updated. The actors are different. It is set in a different part of the country. It's set in the South rather than like the far Midwest, like Utah.
Right.
So there are things that are changed about it. It's just narratively beat for beat. Exactly.
So
but it has good actors. Dennis Quaid plays the John Lithgow part, and he's good. Andy McDowell plays the Diane Wiest part, and she's good. I don't know quite what it is about it.
Yeah, I so admire you in this, that you are willing to give just about anything a try, even if in this case it's redoing something that you absolutely love, but you still give it a chance, and you gave it enough of a chance that you ended up liking it, even though you didn't originally like that. I admire that. I think I would say this does feel like one of those movies that actually, you were talking about how CGI is an update to certain things. The dancing in this, like the updated dancing with some seriously talented dancers.
The dancing in this movie is
spectacular.
Insane.
And I think it really benefits from that. Whereas that's not always true. Like, it sounds like, I didn't see the Fame remake, but it sounds like that update was maybe kind of left you a little cold. But it feels like the updated dancing and the very professional dancing in this one, which I'm sure there was some professional dancing in the original, but obviously Kevin Bacon and I don't think Laurie Singer, I don't think either of them are these seriously professional dancers.
No, they cast professional dancers rather than who can act, rather than actors, and then tried to teach them how to dance.
And I think there's a little bit of freshness benefit to that. I don't know. I really enjoy watching the dancing in this movie, and they're very likable actors, both of them. So.
And while I hope this would be true of any remake, but I think it often actually isn't. One thing that I think is true about Footloose, and I know because I watched there's like a little documentary on the DVD that I watched, is that you can tell that the director of the remake reveres the original, loves it.
That makes a difference.
So I think he was sort of like, I think it felt blasphemous to him to make real serious changes beyond updating things like the location and the dancing.
Yeah.
And to some degree, like, as somebody who loves the movie, maybe more than the average person loves any movie, I feel him. Like, it's sort of like, like if I was remaking that movie, maybe this is what I would do too. I'm not sure I would go in and be like, how can I rethink this and like improve it? Because there really isn't a way to improve that movie. But what you could do is do a really nice cover version.
I mean, it seems like what he did was cast it extremely well and cast some great dancer actors, right? And that was the good cover he gave to it, right?
And he changed the location.
Yeah, that's true.
Which made sense because he set it in the conservative, religious right South.
Yeah.
Which if you were going to do that story in the current year is where you would probably put it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he took it out of the, not that you couldn't still set it in like the land of Mormons, but it was a little more potent for being set in the South.
People could maybe connect to it a little bit.
And he countrified the music, right? Like he got
that's true.
Blake Shelton covers the title song, and you'll recognize a lot of the songs in the movie, but they're done by different artists.
Yeah.
And
they're updated in a really nice way, I think, for the most part. Yeah. True.
So, and then there's a remake or reboot of a popular TV show from the 80s called The Equalizer, which is probably better known now from the movies than even the film. The show.
That's probably
the show
true.
Is Edward Woodward, the British actor who starred in The Wicker Man, among other things.
I didn't know that.
He plays like an ex-CIA guy who has a lot of guilt over the things he did as a representative of the CIA, as an agent. And his way of assuaging that guilt is to help innocent
Use his
people.
Skills to help people.
And that's basically the premise of the movies too. And you and I didn't we also see The Equalizer during a power outage?
I think maybe we did.
So weird.
I know we saw it in the theater, and it might have been.
We could host we could have a film festival of all the movies we saw during power outages.
I can think of at least 3. Yeah.
What was the third?
Wasn't it Birdman? I think we saw Birdman.
Oh, Birdman. Yeah.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Didn't we also see one of the X-Men movies during a power outage?
Maybe we just think we did. I don't know. Maybe we didn't see all of these during a power outage. Some of them we did.
Yeah,
though.
That's really strange.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just I have a soft spot for these vigilante movies.
Yeah, this is Denzel Washington.
Yeah, I love the
Death
Wish movies, and I just think that it's a cathartic thing to watch, and these movies do it well. And I really like Antoine Fuqua as a filmmaker.
He's made all of them, right? All three of the movies?
I like almost everything.
Yeah, he's
he
a great
makes.
filmmaker.
And Denzel's just great. He's a perfect choice to play the part.
Yep.
And they are pure cinematic popcorn junk.
Some great set pieces,
it's junk
right?
Food,
Some great action set pieces.
Yeah, great action.
Yeah, the Home Depot, it's not called that, but the Home Depot and then the hurricane.
Yeah, and the second one. Yeah, the second one, the climactic really fight is set during a hurricane. It's pretty incredible.
Pretty wild, yeah. There's also a TV show now, right, with Queen Latifah. We should mention.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that.
It's also been rebooted as a TV show, but with Queen Latifah as the equalizer. That's pretty cool.
And then the last one I want to mention. This gets my vote for the best remake of an 80s movie or show. I guess it's a TV show, which is Michael Mann remaking his own Miami Vice.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. So Michael Mann produced the original Miami Vice series, of which I am a huge fan.
You are a huge
and
fan.
Then in like 05-ish, maybe 06, I don't know, somewhere around there, the mid-O's, he remade it as a feature film with Colin Farrell as in the Don Johnson part and Jamie Foxx in the Philip Michael Thomas part, Crockett and Tubbs.
Yep.
And updated it, but kept the core idea, which is what would happen to someone who worked in law enforcement who went so far undercover for so long that they found themselves confused and found their moral compass confused.
Yeah.
And it's based, as everything was in Michael Mann's career, on a ton of interviews and research with real narcotics undercover officers.
I don't think I knew that. Yeah.
And it's just a visceral, great looking, great sounding movie.
It does look great.
They went into they went to Colombia to shoot, and they shot in these like dangerous drug controlled like areas with the stars, and they went in with like one camera. Ooh. And they just stole these shots and got chased out by drug cartels. Some really risky, crazy stuff that only Michael Mann could get away with. And it just has that like glossy Michael Mann aesthetic that only Michael Mann does.
Really
like
great.
His movies, nobody else's movies look quite like or sound quite like his movies. I mean, the closest anyone's ever gotten is Drive by Nicholas Refn, but even that is not, it's just aping it. It's a gloss on what Michael Mann does.
Remind me, doesn't he uses like a special camera or something for those night shots that make him look a particular way? Remind me what that is.
Yeah, it was called the Genesis camera. I think it was made by Sony, if I remember right.
The night shots in this movie, I remember particularly.
Yeah, he was a pioneer of digital filmmaking. He and George Lucas were really the guys out in front experimenting with digital cameras when everybody else was still shooting on 35. And part of it for him was pushing the limits of the exposure that he could get at night.
Yeah.
So, there's a scene early in Miami Vice where the two cops are at a nightclub and they go up on the roof to get reception for their big cell phones. And
back in the day,
you can see just like 100 miles in the distance.
Yeah.
And you can see like this, it's at night, but you can clearly see the storm coming in the distance. And it's just, the movie is full of that kind of like, just, I don't know how else to describe it, like this visceral, tactile. You can feel the atmosphere, like the heavy Florida humidity. Like you can feel it on the screen. You can feel it
coming in the air.
You can feel it coming in the air tonight.
If you will. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just it's a sexy movie.
Yeah.
Gong Li is great in it. And it's just so much fun. And I've seen it a million times and I love it as much as the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Cool. Anything else you want to say about remakes? We've crested an hour here, so.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. We've covered quite a few. We probably are missing some.
Yeah.
But I can't bring them to mind right now.
And I'm sure that they will continue to come. I mean, I looked, by the time we put this episode out, there'll probably be another 5 or 6 that have already come out. Like, I looked at a list of like what's either in development or in production, and it's huge.
Wow.
It's a huge list. I mean, Highlander with Henry Cavill.
That's right.
Escape from New York.
Excited for
they're
that.
remaking.
Yeah.
There's just so many of them, and they're coming fast and furious.
By the way, another John Carpenter remake. Quite a few of those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Carpenter's funny. They've asked him like what he thinks of these remakes, and he's like, as long as they pay me. Like he just
John
wants the
Carpenter,
check.
I guess,
He doesn't care.
You just don't bother him, and he's fine.
Just leave me alone. I'll be in my basement watching Knicks games and or Lakers games and playing video games.
Yeah, he's fine.
All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next time.
See you next time. You've been listening to The Long Rewind. The program is produced by Dustin Morrow and hosted by me, Lisa Molinelli. If you enjoy the show, please consider hitting the subscribe button, leave us a good review on your podcast app, and tell your friends about the program. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.